The Tennessee Vols are roaring and your ticket prices are soaring. Welcome into the Volunteer State. I'm Blake Topmeyer alongside the Knoxville News Sentinels, Adam Sparks and John Adams. We will get to the news on the financial front that Adam broke this week. Tennessee jacking up their football ticket prices for 2025 by an average increase of 14.5%, of which much of that is earmarked as a so-called talent fee to help cover the expected revenue sharing expenses with athletes that are around the corner in college sports Inc. But before we get to that subject, huge game on the schedule for Tennessee Saturday. It is the Josh Heupel returns to Oklahoma game. Of course, legendary Sooner player, led Oklahoma to a national championship in the 2000 season, was a Heisman runner-up, longtime assistant coach for Bob Stoops until he was fired, along with other members of that staff, by Stoops in 2014. So Heupel will return to Norman with his nationally ranked Vols on Saturday for a big game for playoff implications for both teams. So, guys, let's start with Heupel. Let's start with the Oklahoma narrative. Adam, you were at Heupel's press conference on Monday, asked him a question about Oklahoma. I know he's fielded a couple questions about Oklahoma. He's fielded questions about Oklahoma really for the past year, knowing that this game was on the schedule. Do you have any insight, Adam, to what maybe Josh's true feelings are as it pertains to Oklahoma, given that he was a legend there, is a legend there, but was fired there by Bob Stoops a decade ago?
Well, I mean, how he really feels, I think, is going to be hidden from us. I mean, it can be pretty complicated because it's no secret that it was a pretty icy relationship between him and Bob Stoops in the years after he was fired. And we're coming up on almost a decade ago when he was fired. Him and the athletic director and him and possibly Mike Stoops, Bob Stoops' brother, who was not fired, who was retained. He was the defensive coordinator at the time at Oklahoma. In KnoxNews, I'll have a full breakdown of why Josh Heupel was fired. There was a lot of different reasons, and a lot of reasons why he maybe could have a grudge to this day. I don't think we're going to see the true feelings of Josh Heupel. I thought he handled it pretty well this week, that he came out and sort of, softened up his enemy a little bit. I think a lot of us anticipated the press conference on Monday that Josh Heupel would come in, probably be pretty short in his remarks about Oklahoma, would probably say, I'm grateful to Oklahoma, but it's all about the players this week, and I'm not going to address that sort of thing. Instead, he talked at length, probably the most candid I've seen him in a press conference since he got here. So that surprised a lot of us that he talked about it at length. He looked like he was at ease with his relationship with Oklahoma. But I know it still stings, I think, to some extent, that the fact that he was fired from his alma mater all those years ago. Think about it. He was a Heisman Trophy runner-up. Bob Stoops had one national championship, and that was with Josh Heupel at quarterback. Now that doesn't, you don't have a birthright to be a coach at your alma mater just because of how you played. You can talk to T. Martin about that, or Phil Fulmer, or Johnny Majors. Eventually that comes to an end, which again, I don't know why guys want to coach at their alma mater. It seems like just a lost cause. But I think he probably still feels unfair that he got fired all those years later. It turned out great for him. It turned out great for Oklahoma. They ended up with Lincoln Riley as the offensive coordinator. And I think all these years later, I think there is part of Heupel that has made peace with that, because, it's sort of, if you have just an awful breakup or a divorce or something, and, it hurts at the time, probably hurts for a number of years, and then you end up with a prettier girl, and you look back at the one you left, or the one that left you, and say, I'm better off now than where I was then, or I could have been. I think that's sort of where Josh Heupel has landed with things, because if he stays at Oklahoma, if they keep him around, he's not the Tennessee coach now, and he's probably not in a better situation than he is now.
Yeah, John, I want to follow up with that and come to you, because let's continue down the road that Adam's laying out there, because I think there is something to be said for, even though this probably stung for Josh Heupel, not probably, it did sting to get fired by his alma mater and the coach whom he played for as a star quarterback. I think a strong case could be made that in the long run, Heupel was better off. And I'm not saying Tennessee's a better job than Oklahoma. They're both really, really good jobs. But what this did for Heupel was it got him out of the nest, so to speak. He'd worked with Bob Stoops for a long time. He played there. This made him sort of leave, reinvent himself. It really freed him up on offense. He became the offensive coordinator at Utah State for 1 year, and then Barry Odom brought him in at Missouri as the OC at Missouri with Drew Lock as the quarterback, and Odom gave Heupel free reign over the offense. Heupel essentially was the head coach of the offense during his 2 years as a coordinator at Missouri. That's where that warp speed spread system that Heupel runs today at Tennessee really started to take hold. Heupel put up great offensive stats with Drew Lock and the Tigers. He's hired by UCF, then he's hired by Tennessee, and we know where things stand now. And yet he doesn't have the pressure of replacing Bob Stoops at his alma mater. I mean, no one likes to be fired. Sure, it stinks to get fired from your alma mater, but a decade later, like I said, I think I could make the argument that Josh Heupel, in the long run, benefited from this.
Yeah, I see your point with that. I agree with that. I also like what Adam was doing there. I was taking notes because I like country music lyrics, and I was thinking up some while Adam was talking about divorce and breaking up. All my favorite country songs are about somebody's leaving. One of them is "She Ain't Going Nowhere, She's Just Leaving." So, so you're gone, but I'm strong at Tennessee. Oklahoma's gone, but I'm strong at Tennessee. Yeah, I agree with all that. I'm sure Josh Heupel has tremendous memories, though, of Oklahoma. I'm sure he has great friends there, and he's part of a great tradition that never can take that away. He won a national championship, the last national championship Oklahoma has won. 24 years and counting now, and that's a long time for the Sooners to go without winning the whole shebang. However, that said, and I don't care how great he talks about Oklahoma, and I don't care if he sends a Christmas card to Bob Stoops. I think he will, if he's got the opportunity, he will go Steve Spurrier on the Sooners. Remember how Steve Spurrier was when he was coaching at Florida? Anybody that had slighted him in the least bit, it was payback. I remember the Gators put a 59-3 beating on LSU one Saturday night. And in the press conference, Spurrier mentioned, well, I couldn't get a second interview there when they had that head coaching interview. Then he put 70 points on Kentucky. When Bill Curry was there, Bill Curry didn't retain Steve Spurrier on his Georgia Tech staff when he took the job, and Spurrier said, well, guess I just wasn't good enough for that staff. I think Josh Heupel will want to be at his dead level best against the Sooners, and I think he'll score as many points as he can. Not being vindictive, but just want to remind you what you missed out on.
Where do you think go ahead, Adam.
Let me just bring this up because John mentioned Steve Spurrier. Steve Spurrier and Bob Stoops. Bob Stoops was the defensive coordinator under Spurrier at Florida, of course. So they've had a good friendship relationship over the years. I think I've told this story before on the pod, but it's very fitting this week. Josh Heupel, when he got the first year Coach of the Year award or something like that back in after the 21 season, he was on a Zoom call. Of course, this is during COVID. He was on a Zoom call, and it was the Steve Spurrier Award. And so Steve Spurrier was on the Zoom call along with Josh Heupel and a handful of reporters. And it's going to go live sort of as a press conference announcement. But we're all sitting in a holding pattern on the Zoom, and it's not live, but it's live to us, the reporters. And so it's like 5 minutes there where Steve Spurrier and whoever else is on the call can have just some little remarks of what they assume are off the record. and Heupel's little bubble on the Zoom pops up, and Heupel's in there, and Spurrier sees him. Again, we're all watching on Zoom, and Spurrier says, "Hey, Josh, I was just thinking the other day, has old Bobby Stoops won a national title since you've been there? No, I didn't think so." And then just sort of moves up. Heupel just sort of like didn't react. He was just, "How's it going, coach?" or something. Spurrier, again, a good relationship with Bob Stoops, but he will even needle his friends who
Oh
are
yeah.
not even there to defend themselves. So they in that cluster of coaches and that fraternity, like they all know who is perceived to had like knifed somebody in the back a little bit, and so there's a little wink wink between a lot of those guys.
What's interesting is how Oklahoma is going to handle this. I was talking to Sooners athletic director Joe Castiglione earlier this week. He's the longtime athletic director at Oklahoma, was the AD there when Heupel was a quarterback in that national championship team, and has been the AD ever since. And he said he didn't announce the finalized plans, but he said something is in the works for Saturday to make some acknowledgement, some recognition of Heupel before the game. He didn't say exactly how they're going to do that, but that is going to be interesting from a Sooner perspective. Like, okay, you're making recognition of this legendary player who worked for Bob Stoops for such a long time, but what if he comes out and then just steamrolls you on Saturday? How's that going to look for poor Brent Venables in a coronation of Josh Heupel in Norman? So yeah, interesting.
I think they're recognizing the 2000 national championship team, I believe, at that game. And of course, Josh Heupel's the quarterback of that team.
Yeah.
But I think that's at halftime, so I don't think that would. I don't think they're
Well,
going to bring Heupel out of the locker room at halftime. But I suppose that any recognition or video that they have of Heupel will probably sort of pair with that, I would guess.
so what
What
they
do you
could do, what they could do on that, they could be announcing we want to, well, and name some of the stars on that team, and then it was quarterback by Joe Rudd. Like there's a, like there's a mic problem.
Sure.
Yeah.
Guys, what do you think about the implications of this game beyond the Heupel Oklahoma narrative, but in terms of this season, in terms of the college football playoff? Um, we've had this one penciled, gosh, since February, probably, of being one of the most critical games on Tennessee's schedule this year. It felt like one of the swing games that would determine whether Tennessee makes the playoff or not. And now you have both teams sitting here at 3-0. I think we can say certainly the Vols profile as a playoff contender. And depending on what would happen in Norman on Saturday, if the Sooners win, I think you have to take them seriously as a playoff contender as well. I'm wondering, though, if you guys think, is this a make or break game for either team's playoff chances? And I'm not saying, like, do they automatically become eliminated with a loss Saturday? Because, yeah, sure, they could run the table and get in. But from the way you guys look at it, is it make or break for each team, or more so for Oklahoma or Tennessee?
Well, for Oklahoma, they have a brutal schedule, so it's not going to get any easier after Tennessee. I don't think Oklahoma is a playoff team, even if they beat Tennessee. I just think there's uh, too many tough games ahead for them. For Tennessee, if Tennessee beats Oklahoma this weekend, I think they're going to be in the playoff, because I think you can lose two and still get in. They've got Alabama and Georgia left. Even if they lose those two, I mean, the rest of the schedule is very, very manageable for Tennessee. They're going to beat Vanderbilt. They're going to beat UTEP. They're going to beat, who else? Mississippi State. They have Kentucky at home. Florida is a mess. They go to Arkansas, which could be, something, But they've really got two really tough games after this one. So I think if they beat Oklahoma, I think they're going to make the playoff. If they lose to Oklahoma, I don't think they're out of it. I don't think it's a make or break in that way. It's definitely a make game for them if they win it. It could in retrospect be a break game, depending on how they do against Alabama or Georgia. Because I think both of those games could be up in the air. But if you're a team that can't beat Oklahoma, it's going to be tough to win at Georgia. I still probably would pick Tennessee to beat Alabama, maybe because it's at Neyland. But I think Alabama looks better than Georgia right now, so there's a lot of football ahead. But it's a make if they win, because I think they'll get in the playoffs. It's not necessarily a break if they lose, but it could be by the end of the year.
Yeah, I agree
John,
with Adam on.
do you think? Yeah.
Yeah, I just think Tennessee at 10-2, Tennessee should get in the playoff, and playing. If it can beat Oklahoma, then it can just split with Georgia and Alabama, or look at it a different way in a more positive light from a Tennessee perspective. If it beats Oklahoma now, then it can say we just go win at home, split, beat Alabama at home, lose to Georgia on the road. You're 11-1. You might be in the SEC championship game. I think you probably would be. So it's a huge win for Tennessee if it beats Oklahoma. But like Adam said, if you lose, you still got 2 more games, you win. But this is the one I think Tennessee needs to win, but because it would put in such a great position. As far as Oklahoma goes, it was like Greg Sankey says, "Hey, the good news is we're accepting you into the SEC. The bad news is," and then delivers a fiendish laugh. "Here's your schedule for the first season. 4 of its last 5 games are against top 10 teams. That doesn't even include Tennessee. You got Texas in the middle of the year. It's like there's no make or break with Oklahoma. Its playoff chances were broken, I think, before the season ever started. So to me, who has the most to lose in this game from an Oklahoma perspective is Brent Venables, because of just what we've been talking about. Favorite son, quarterback of the national championship team, comes home, beats the defensive-minded Oklahoma coach with his offense. That's not going to be a good look for Brent Venables, especially if they decide to honor Heupel at halftime.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you guys. I think for Tennessee's perspective, it is, as Adam put it, it's a make if they win. Now, something fishy could happen. There aren't a lot of landmines left on the schedule other than the big 2, Alabama and Georgia after this. Adam was running through it there. I mean, I guess you could say road game at Arkansas. Maybe that's a little bit of a landmine, but probably not much. But in so much as there is one other than the big 2 remaining in Alabama and Georgia, that would probably be it. But I think Tennessee with a win is in great shape. With a loss, as you guys are saying, that means they need to split at least with Alabama or Georgia. I think if Oklahoma wins, I guess I would be a little more willing, maybe, than it sounds like John is, to put Oklahoma on a list of contenders for the playoff. I mean, you guys are right. It is absolutely just a brutal schedule. The rest of the schedule for Oklahoma includes neutral site game against Texas, road game at Ole Miss, road game at Missouri, home game against Alabama, road game at LSU. And that includes a couple more winnable games that I'm not mentioning. So even if they beat Tennessee, it's a tough road to the playoff. But I would be willing to more seriously consider them as a contender if they beat Tennessee, depending on how it looks. I think if Oklahoma loses, yeah, you can pretty well kiss the idea of the Sooners to the playoff goodbye. So as you look at this game, guys, and I want to get to the season ticket price situation next, but kind of wrapping up thoughts on this game, I see Tennessee having the advantage on offense. The defenses both look pretty good. Oklahoma's defense has been ahead of the game, ahead of its offense so far, but I think Nico's development seems to be further down the road than where Jackson Arnold is, the redshirt freshman quarterback from Oklahoma. But how do you guys sort of handicap the matchup from what you've seen of these two teams? Of course, you've seen a lot of Tennessee, but I know you guys have been tracking Oklahoma as well.
Well, I think a big indicator in this game is how does each defense attack the young 5-star quarterback on the other side, and how does that quarterback respond to how it's attacked? I think it's going to be a little different. So Brent Venables, the Oklahoma head coach, his defenses have always been multiple, to use a coaching phrase, but complex. A lot of different coverages, disguising a lot of things, different fronts, and so he will try to fool Nico. He will try to make Nico make the wrong decision, turnovers, misreads, get Tennessee in the wrong type of offense that they want to run it when they want to throw it when they should want to run it, those sort of things. He'll try to fool Nico. On the other side, Tim Banks for Tennessee, always he runs an aggressive style of defense. He also feels like, and I think rightfully so, that his talent on the defensive line is better than the talent on Oklahoma's new and injured offensive line. And so I think he's going to try to come at Jackson Arnold, the other 5-star quarterback, the one for Oklahoma. I think his tactic is going to be to try to overwhelm Jackson Arnold, to overwhelm him with pressure, to try to rattle him. And so, does Nico make the right decisions looking at a whole lot of complex defense that he hasn't seen a lot of, especially in that environment? It's going to be loud. Can he combat that and keep his cool and make good decisions? If so, then that's going to neutralize Oklahoma's defense, and Tennessee's going to win by double digits. If Jackson Arnold is overwhelmed by Tennessee's defense, just that pressure coming at him, if he's overwhelmed, then Tennessee also is going to win this game by double digits. If Jackson Arnold can deal with the pressure, especially early on, is able to run that offense and to get outside of Tennessee's contain to run the ball, then Oklahoma's going to have something on offense. But Oklahoma's offense to this point has been pretty limited, and it's going to be, I think it's going to be imperative on Tennessee's defense to send a message in the first couple of drives. I think Jackson Arnold had every reason, probably in the deep recesses of his mind, to think my offensive line cannot hold up to what I'm seeing on film from Tennessee's defensive front. If he feels that, and if that feels confirmed in the first couple of drives, then he's in trouble, because the first couple of games for Jackson Arnold for Oklahoma this year, he was very timid. He looked like a guy that thought his offensive line could not hold up and that he didn't have a supporting cast. If you hammer that into his head in this game, early in this game, I think he's going to make some poor decisions. I think he's going to continue to be timid. Nico has a supporting cast. He has a veteran center. He has a veteran offensive line. He has some depth at wide receiver. They've run the ball phenomenally so far through 3 games. He doesn't have to force the ball downfield. He doesn't have to put the whole game on his shoulders. And so I think it's very imperative that both quarterbacks start well and start in a positive way. And it's imperative for both defenses to just exploit what they can out of these redshirt freshman quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think Tennessee's more capable of causing problems for Jackson Arnold because of what we keep harping on is that offensive line for Oklahoma's. I think Tennessee can lay back more guys. You've got to be very wary of Jackson Arnold's running ability. He's a really good runner. He made the decisive play in Oklahoma's victory over Tulane by scrambling on a 24-yard touchdown run out of the pocket. So you got to be careful when you go after him. You got to be able to contain him too. But I think Oklahoma has some really, really good secondary guys. Certainly Billy Bowman, Peyton Bowen or Bowen. Those guys can make plays back there. And Brent Venables, as experienced as he is with defenses, he'll try a lot of stuff, certainly, to confuse Nico. And we make Nico pretty much out to be Superman, but he still only had, this will only be his, fourth start this year, fifth game overall. So I don't know. There are things he hasn't seen. Now, how will he react to that? He could have some issues with that. So I think Venables certainly will try and do that. But again, I think maybe with Tim Banks likes to try some creative blitzes too. So Nico might have learned something practicing against Tennessee's defense. We always talk about how Tennessee's pass defense is vulnerable. But Mike's can come up with some pretty exotic blitzes. So maybe Nico's seen more than in practice than he's seen in games.
Yeah, NC State. For people that know that don't know, NC State dropped 8 into coverage against Nico. So they had 3 rushing, dropped 8 into coverage, and they basically said, "We're not going to let this 5-star quarterback beat us. We're going to make you run the ball." And Tennessee eventually said, "Okay, we'll take that. Thank you for that," and just ran the ball, 6, 8, 10 yards a clip. Um, Oklahoma, I don't think will do that. Brent Venables has never been a drop 8 guy. It's sort of a surrender type defense. We're going to give you some, and we're going to let you take it. He's not that type. He's the type that will, as John said, will try a lot of different things. So if he does drop 8, I'm sure Josh Heupel and Nico will love that because they'll just hand it to Dylan Sampson, and he'll churn up yardage, and they won't have to throw the ball. But I don't think Brent Venables is going to do that. He's going to make it hard on Nico, and every drive that he goes out there, there's going to be a different look for him.
Let's close with Adam's story this week about the ticket price hike that will occur at Tennessee next season. Tennessee, not the only school that will be raising ticket prices. Georgia announced earlier this month their plan for a ticket price increase for 2025. This is all happening against the backdrop of it is expected, not finalized yet, it's still in legal proceedings, but it is expected that revenue sharing will be coming to college athletics as soon as the 2025-2026 athletic season. What that would mean, if finalized by a judge, would be that athletic departments could be able to share up to about $22 million a year in revenue with their athletes. So, when this all came about a few months ago, this house case settlement that we've been hearing about for a few months now, the question became, how are athletic departments going to handle these new expenses when they arrive? And I mean, the general school of thought in a business sense would be, well, you either increase revenue or you tighten the belt and cut expenses. What a joke. College athletics rein in expenses? Come on now. There's raises to be issued. That was never happening. So, of course, we knew college athletics would try to increase revenues to cover these new expenses. And the most familiar way that athletic departments have to increase revenue is on the backs of the trusty fan. And we're seeing Tennessee at least be upfront, I guess, about this. And as Adam reported, there's a 10% talent fee in this increase. That's Tennessee telling you that, hey, this is money earmarked for the revenue sharing proposal that is likely to go into effect in 2025, 2026. Adam, I know you talked to Danny White about this change. So what else can you fill us in on about this? Obviously, a lot of fans are going to be frustrated. Could be tough for certain fans to stomach the hike, but we know that supply is not as great as demand when it comes to Tennessee football tickets right now.
Yeah, I mean, the difference between Tennessee and Georgia is that Georgia just said, hey, we're going to raise ticket prices, and kept it sort of vague, nebulous about where the money was going. Tennessee had discussions internally about should they approach it in that way, or should they just be transparent and just tell fans what it is? Like, hey, this money is going to go to players. That's what it is. And that's where you get the term talent fee. I've talked to a number of fans today about it to get their reaction. I've found sort of 3 groups in the reactions of Tennessee fans. One is the group that says, hey, I don't like paying higher prices, but I like it better when you tell me it's going to go to players. And those are people looking at it and saying, money got Nico here. Money got James Pierce here, or David Sanders, the stud 5-star tackle they have coming in next year. Money brought in these players that now have a top 10 team. And they appreciate the fact that Tennessee told them that's where the money's going. It's a little easier to hand it over if they know it's going directly to players and not just some weird athletic department operations expense that they'll never, never see never know where it went. That's group number one. Group number two are the ones that say this sucks, but I want to keep going to games, but I can't afford it. So I've had 4 tickets. Now I'm going to have 2 tickets. Instead of mom, dad, and the 2 kids going, now it's going to be 1 parent, 1 kid, and we're going to alternate. And we're just going to figure it out. We're going to keep going, but we're going to have to cut some. Those tickets will be eaten up by the 15,000 that are on the waiting list. There's a supply and demand element here that's pretty important at Tennessee that it does not exist at most other schools. The third group are the ones that I've seen that have said, "Well, I'm done. I'm not going to any more games. I'm done with this. They priced me out, and that's why I dropped my ticket 6 years ago, or 8 years ago, or 11 years ago, or whatever." And those I don't think Tennessee are worried about, because those are people that were done a long time ago. They're not getting rid of their season tickets. They heard he had gotten rid of them, but they are recycling a gripe. That's understandable to some extent. It's a lot of money to fork over, but those are not going to hit Tennessee in the pocketbook because those people already gave up their tickets long ago. So those are the 3 groups. Tennessee, I wonder if another athletic director would have done this, a past AD for Tennessee, because Danny White, in one way, it can look a little cold. He has given a pretty good explanation of it, but I think it can look a little cold, the business sense of him, to say there's a long waiting list, supply and demand is on our side. We're gonna pull some more money out of fans. I understand fans' frustration with that. On the other side, it's the right decision business wise. You have to come up with the money. Tennessee did not invent revenue sharing. It's coming. You're either going to pay it and opt in, or you're not. And they have an asset, a resource, which is an enormous, high-paying, passionate fan base. And I think some past ads would not have pulled the trigger on this to ask for this kind of price hike. On business, on paper, it's the right decision. I think some past ads may have been a little too sentimental to do it. That's my take.
Yeah, you know, I wrote a column on this today on our website, and the thing is, fans, I can sympathize with them, but fans need to understand, as much as they love UT, that doesn't mean Tennessee will love them back. I mean, it is a bottom line business operation on Tennessee's part, and Danny White's making a business decision. The thing is, though, he has all the leverage. I mean, you talk about Adam's talking about fans that might say, "I'm done. I've had it. They've turned me off. Never going back to Neyland Stadium." Well, when I think of somebody giving up their tickets, I just imagine ravenous animals just crawling out there waiting for to gobble up those tickets. I mean, they got thousands of people waiting to buy season tickets to Tennessee. Everything's in Tennessee's favor right now. If one fan doesn't want to pay the price, somebody else will. And the other side of this, and I think it applies not just to football, but all Tennessee sports, Tennessee seems to have the money to be very competitive in a money driven sports market. We've
Yeah.
already seen it with NIL. And when we go into this revenue sharing, SEC schools will come up with the needed money for revenue sharing, but they might not all come up with the money needed for NIL. But a lot of other schools can't do it. And I wonder how many baseball programs around the country are going to come up with the necessary money for revenue sharing to have. I mean, could end up having 30 something baseball players on a college scholarship, but Tennessee, I believe, will do it. And so all this money that's being asked for fans that fans are having to contribute, I guess they can look at it. This is going into the most worthy of causes because it's going into winning, and it could be winning in not just football but everything.
In an era where money is tied directly to success on the field and on the court, in that era, Tennessee is fit to win more than they would be in previous eras. It's an enormous fan base. It's a passionate fan base. It's a fan base that will pay. And we mentioned the season ticket waiting list. You know, Danny White, since he's gotten here, has raised tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars more than Tennessee had raised in the past. That's why he got his big raise. That's probably a side topic. But he dumped resources into all these sports, and they have won at the highest level that they've ever won at. They've won the All Sports Trophy in the SEC. They've been top 5 in the all sports nationally. Baseball just won a national title. Men's basketball is going to the Elite Eight. Football is now in the top 10 2 of the last 3 years. I mean, this is sort of tongue in cheek a little bit, but Danny White has been given capital, and he's spending it. That's in a literal sense. In this instance, he's been capital and he's spending it. And I know a lot of Tennessee fans are frustrated by it, but yeah, if you give up your seat, somebody else is waiting in line to do it.
Yeah, and Tennessee knew what they were getting when they hired Danny White. I mean, this was his reputation, right? He was a revenue man. This was he does more than one thing well as an AD. He's made some good hires too. Josh Heupel, chief among them. But first and foremost, I think Danny White came to Tennessee as an idea person, as someone who could be almost ruthless when it came to generating revenue. And I think in this era, where, as Adam said, and John, you were saying too, like revenue and money is linked, does not guarantee, but it is linked to success. I think really this change is, to me, 3 things. One, it's predictable. When we knew these new expenses were coming, like I said, there was going to be no belt tightening. There was going to be more revenue generation. So 1, it's predictable. 2, it's transparent. Tennessee has been upfront about what they're doing. But 3, I think it is a little bit sad in the general sense that there's not a lot of room for the humble family of 4 to be season ticket holders at Vols games. And that's just, college athletics, especially college football, it's kind of moving into that space where operas and Broadway shows have been. They're a luxury for the well-heeled, and for your humble family of 4, dust off the rabbit ears or splurge for a YouTube subscription, because that's I mean, we laugh, but that is the sort of the sad reality in this frontier of college sports. John, you got a set of rabbit ears still at your house? I got a set.
No, I don't, but you're right. It's just it is so money driven. And the irony there is that fans, or particularly in the SEC and certainly at Tennessee, as Adam pointed out, Tennessee has the most passionate fans in the world. It means so much from them. Man, if they had the money, if they have the money, they'll spend it. But if they don't have the money, sadly, they might not even be able to go inside Neyland Stadium at one point.
All right, guys. Well, you can find all the coverage of that issue. Adam's got the reporting. John's got commentary as well over at KnoxNews.com. Also, tons of coverage leading up to the Oklahoma game. Be the biggest game of the season so far for Tennessee. You can find all that coverage at KnoxNews.com, and we will be back to discuss with you next week. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Volunteer State.